Well, we are heading into Holy Week, and we're going to do some things that become new to get ready together for Easter. But today, I am joined by our good friend, Dr. Rick. Hello, Rick.
Hey, John. So nice to see you.
You look pristine.
So do you.
Um, the reason I particularly wanted Rick to join us, and this may actually spill over into a couple of episodes, is because at the end of chapter 6, greatest teaching of all time by the greatest teacher of all time, Jesus walks through comments about worry and the state of our mind and heart and emotions and thoughts that are so psychologically oriented that I thought we really need a professional to help us unpack this. So, Rick, what I'm going to do, we've talked a little bit about one aspect of this, but actually I'm going to hit quite a few. I'm going to read through what Jesus says and pause quite regularly and then ask you, what are we supposed to do about this? And parts of it I'll set up a little bit more, and then other parts I'll just stop immediately. So this is kind of Wheel of Fortune. You ready?
Sounds good.
Okay.
Great.
Matthew chapter 6, verse 25. Jesus says, "Therefore I tell you, do not worry." And then he goes into what to not worry about. Reading a really interesting comment by Dale Allison, who's a commentator on the Sermon on the Mount. And he says, actually, to follow Jesus, to do what he's been talking about, don't store up treasures on earth. Don't serve that master, is to invite anxiety, because we live in a life where we need all those kinds of things. But here's the difficulty. Jesus says, don't worry. Now, my wife loves chocolate-covered almonds, and she'll say, don't eat my almonds. I know how to do that. Or a lot of commands in the Bible, don't lie, don't steal, don't cheat. That's at least pretty clear. Worry is a feeling. Worry is an emotion. And you can't just turn emotions on and off with willpower. So, Rick, you're dealing with clients. I know that worry and anxiety is something that folks deal with a lot. How do you understand, what do you do with a command like this where Jesus just says, don't worry?
To me, he's trying to give us advice about how to manage worry, or I might even use the word anxiety.
Mm-hmm.
I think he makes it clear throughout this passage, which I read beforehand too, it's ineffectiveness, that there's not much utility to worry. So that the less worry you have, it's a little bit interesting, like, don't worry. That'd be like me a little bit saying, don't think about a purple car. You're still going to think about a purple car. So I don't think he can mean literally like, use the force of will and just never worry. But
Do you ever say that to your clients? I remember years ago, I don't know if we've ever talked about this or you've seen it, but there's a hilarious clip of Bob Newhart, the therapist, where his therapeutic intervention is just, stop it.
Yeah.
The woman that comes in to see him is troubled with these anxious, obsessive thoughts. just stop it. So you ever say that to a client? You ever want to say it to a client?
Well, I'd say it, but then I smile just like you're smiling, because we both know that's going to be effective. If you say it too strongly, it's just such an invitation to not do it. And so again, if I think the force of Jesus' words, don't worry, and then he goes into these reasons why you're not going to add anything, worry has enough problems, the next day has enough problems of its own, that sort of thing. So I think he's giving us instruction, and it turns out to be just fantastic psychology about managing worry. I think I remember telling you, John, in some ways I like simple explanations, and that's partly why I'm drawn so much to the teachings of Jesus. To me, if you overfocus on the past, you're going to struggle and wrestle with depression. You overfocus on the future, tomorrow, things that are uncertain, you're going to deal more with worry and anxiety. So to me, I read this passage and I think, this is the Jesus way. What he is teaching in this part of the Sermon on Mount is the Jesus way. Don't live in the past. Don't live in the future. Be in this day. And it makes my heart sing, honestly. Like, that is the Jesus way. Other thinkers think that, mindfulness, living in the present, but these are the words of Jesus on the Sermon on the Mount, as you keep telling us, the greatest sermon ever preached.
So really, this would be pretty connected with, give us this day our daily bread. If not, talking about yesterday's bread or tomorrow's bread. So there's a real connection between um, living in the present, which is the only place where we can find God, and being freed of worry.
So true. Yes. I think it's like the tonic, the two tonics I would say as a counselor to people dealing with worry and anxiety: live in the moment and trust God with tomorrow, with the future.
So that moves to another part of what we're invited to that uh, you and I were talking about recently, and I had never thought about before, that I can struggle with both problems on either side. On the one hand, um, there's the problem of ruminating, where I'm afraid of something, worried about something that might happen. I obsess over it, spin unproductively. This book that's
Yeah.
been so helpful, You Are Not Your Brain, Jeffrey Schwartz, the author of it, talks about deceptive brain messages. But the key to them really is they have this ruminating, non-productive quality, engaging in repetitive thoughts caused by deceptive messages that do not lead to a solution or any forward progress. And it creates this horrible sensation inside that my uh-oh center is going
Yeah.
crazy. And so rumination is a real problem. And I can engage in that. On the other hand, and Jeff talks about this in his book, I can also have a problem of avoidance, where probably because I know if I think about something, it could trigger anxiety in me. I just decide, or I don't even decide, I just default into not thinking about it. And I'm capable of doing both of these. I was thinking about writing, and there's times in writing where a book does really well, and so then I'm real glad about it, and then other times where it doesn't sell at all. And I can think of times where that was going on, and on the one hand, I could ruminate over, oh, I feel like a failure. On the other hand, I needed to talk to my publisher about here's what's going on, but instead I just went into avoidance mode. And I don't want to talk about it. I don't want to admit it. It would make me feel bad. I would feel embarrassed. I would feel shame. And so I just go into denial. Or I think about, we've talked about decisions in life, and I can think about a decision that I face where I can both ruminate, oh, this would be awful if this bad thing happened, and then avoid making a decision or avoid thinking about it. When I just think about it, it will trigger those anxious thoughts. So then my question is, and I did a little chart. Everybody see when it looks even more professional than this. That on the one hand, I think about this topic and I start to ruminate, and that's no good. On the other hand, if I just go into avoidance mode, I'm not going to make a good decision. I won't think it through. That's no good. So what I need is in between rumination and avoidance, something like calm focus, but I can't make myself do that. So how do you help us navigate, Rick, between ruminating and avoiding?
And that is the secret, just exactly how you said it. If we can live in the dynamic tension, one might even say, is your particular bugaboo, though of course you're saying that you have both, that you're more of a ruminator or more of a avoider. Avoiding on that side of the spectrum, I often think that if I avoid the thing that brings me worry or anxiety, it's like throwing a little bit of gasoline on a small fire, and then it makes it larger. So the anxiety or worry tends to, over time, be amplified by avoidance.
Why does avoiding amplify it? Why is it like putting gas on the fire?
Because it just seems to grow in its intensity. We haven't really done anything to face it. So with avoidance, clinically, you would look at words like exposure, like that you would maybe even gradually expose yourself or practice exposing yourself to different elements of what it is that you're worried about. Even
Deliberately on purpose.
Doing it deliberately and on purpose. And sometimes I would think that's part of what counseling, pastoral counseling, or talking to a friend is doing. If you're not tipping over to the other side of ruminating, you're exposing yourself to the topic. You're talking about it. You're processing it. I mean, processing to me is a good word. It's in that calm, focus mid-range that you just talked about on paper. If I'm processing something that I'm concerned about with you, I'm not avoiding it. So that's the whole point of having close friends, having a team, having a counselor, having a pastor in your life. Is one of the things you're doing is by being relational about the thing, you're spreading it out, getting tools, getting ideas. But I know that what you're really doing is you're countering that extreme instinct to avoid. And so if I can, that's why I'm always going to be a believer in talking things through. I know that's not the only thing. People need tools and skills and that sort of thing too. But, when I think of talking with you regularly, for example, it doesn't feel like I get to avoid something because, most days that I talk to John, he's going to ask me, and he always to remember what I was concerned about yesterday or last week. So I don't get to avoid. And if you're lucky enough to be in, close relationships, I think my marriage serves a similar kind of purpose. And again, what I'm trying to do is counteract that avoidance. And, I've had a couple cases even this past week where people just spend so much time avoiding something that when it does finally break through, it can feel cataclysmic. I had a guy just talking about a lot of abuse stories when he was young, and he spent a significant part of his life bound up, tense, tight by not talking about it.
Wow.
And finally, he just decided, because his life was just not working in so many different ways, I don't have time to go into, that starting to talk about giving it air. And I know that what we were doing was facing down his massive avoidance of things that needed to be processed and worked through. So that's
Jeffrey will talk about the wise. He uses the phrase "the wise advocate." Really, he means the Holy Spirit.
I like that.
So that processing would be kind of inviting the Holy Spirit, because the Holy Spirit never ruminates. But I can invite the Holy Spirit and another person. And I was thinking as you were talking, probably in the Bible, Esther might be an example of somebody where Israel was facing a genocide, and she was kind of avoiding it until her relative Mordecai approached her and said, you got to face this. You got to do something. You got to go to the king. And if she had not had that person in her life, who knows what would happen.
And you see that in other ways too, when Jesus or other people in the Bible are inviting you to deal with sin, like rather than avoiding it, ignoring it, denying it, repressing it, suppressing it, dealing with it, which can be painful. So counterattacking avoidance can be painful. I don't want to imply anything different, but it's a good kind of pain. It's moving us into the right direction.
Hi, I'm Tim. I'm a part of the team here at Become New. You've just been listening to a conversation between Rick Blackman and John Ortberg, both PhDs in clinical psychology and deeply committed followers of Jesus. Usually these episodes on Become New will run about 10 minutes, but because this conversation was so rich, so good, we decided to just let the recording run and break it up into 3 parts. So this is part 1 of 3 parts. Stick around to hear the other 2 parts coming up soon. If you're anything like me, then you relate to what they were talking about today. I actually woke up really early this morning and my mind just started racing with all the things that I'm looking ahead at and feeling anxious about. And maybe you're someone who focuses on the future and feels worried and anxious about the future. Maybe you're someone, like Rick said, that focuses on the past and struggles with depression. Wherever you're at today, the invitation is the same. It's just to invite the Holy Spirit in to each moment this day, to release the worries of the future or the regrets of the past to Him, and to be fully present in each moment and ask God for help to do that. So I encourage you to do that today as we're all on this journey to grow spiritually one day at a time. If you're new to the channel, be sure to subscribe so you don't miss any future episodes that we release. If you like what you hear, you can head over to our website, becomenew.com, where we have over 700 10-minute episodes categorized into different topics that you might find interesting, all about the person you're becoming. If you've got a prayer request, there's a group of us that meet each weekday faithfully to pray for reviewers just like yourself. You can text us that prayer request at 855-888-0444. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time.